Hi, welcome back to the Gluten Free RN. I'm Nadine, your host of the Gluten Free RN podcast. And today on episode 20, we are going to talk about weight loss and weight gain in celiac disease. Some of our people are obese when they get diagnosed with celiac disease, and other people need to gain weight because they are underweight. So we're going to talk about weight issues today on the episode 20 of Gluten Free RN. Welcome back. Welcome back to episode 20 of Gluten Free RN podcast, where today we're going to talk about weight issues related to celiac disease. Some of the people that get diagnosed with celiac disease are overweight, and other people are underweight. One of the classic ways people did get tested for celiac disease, if it was recognized by a physician, was they would be losing weight or underweight and have chronic diarrhea. Those were the classic signs or symptoms of celiac disease for many years, and for some physicians and practitioners, those are still the only signs or symptoms associated with celiac disease as far as they're concerned. For the rest of us, we know that there's well over 300 signs and symptoms associated with celiac disease. Interestingly enough, the vast majority of the people that do get diagnosed with celiac disease are considered to be overweight. And in this country, in the United States, it's estimated that about 68% of our population is overweight. That's enormous, so to speak. So it is a problem. Obesity is an enormous health risk and problem in our society. And some people want to, minimize that and say it's not a health risk. It's only a health risk for some, or it's not a problem. People just have to get over the fact that some people are overweight. The problem is that it is a health issue. It's a comorbid factor in many diseases, and it increases morbidity and mortality. And I, as a nurse, have to be interested in anything that increases sickness and death. So a lot of our people are obese when they get diagnosed with celiac disease. If you've read my book, Donation, Samantha Miller was actually about 125 pounds overweight when she did get diagnosed with celiac disease as like a very young woman. So she got diagnosed with celiac disease, unfortunately continued to work in a pizzeria until she and I talked and when I hired her. So she actually lost over 125 pounds just by going gluten-free. I hear that story very frequently, and let me explain what happens and why some people are actually obese when they get diagnosed with celiac disease. When your body is starving, when it is unable to absorb nutrients appropriately because of villus atrophy, damage in the small intestine, again, which can be patchy, your intestines are unable to absorb nutrients appropriately, so your cells in your body cannot utilize what's not there. So the nutrients don't get absorbed, and your body has to compensate in some way. So the fact that people are obese is not that they are getting too much food. It's that the food they are eating is either nutrient deficient, which means there are no nutrients in that food, and or the food that they are eating is not able to be absorbed because of the villus atrophy and the damage. So in an effort to stay alive and to stay functioning, people's bodies compensate. And sometimes what that means is that our bodies will store fat as a cheap energy source. And it allows our body to use that fat sometimes in a starvation state. Now, we think of starvation as being cachectic or super thin or anorexic. But the reality is a lot of the people that are obese, especially in the United States and probably worldwide, those people are starving. They either have a metabolic disorder or they're unable to absorb any of the nutrients from the food that they are actually consuming. That's an enormous issue. Again, I'm sorry. It is a huge issue because so many people are overweight. So many people are unhealthy. Obesity leads to heart attacks and strokes. Immobility. Immobility itself will cause people to die. If you can't move your body, if you are immobile or you have difficulty walking, immobility is a huge health risk factor. So when I see people that are obese that are in scooters or some other, wheelchair or some other mobility device, I would like those people to, number one, lose weight healthily with the help of a nutritionist or myself or someone that knows about how to do it on a gluten-free diet so that they can actually get up and walk and be more mobile. Because mobility is a healthcare risk. The other thing that I find is that people that are morbidly obese tend to not leave their home. They tend to be trapped and sometimes literally trapped in their home. We have had in the emergency department when I worked there, we used to have sometimes the firefighters or the paramedics would have to cut holes in people's homes in the walls so that they could remove the person that was so large they couldn't get them out any other way. So these people are trapped in their homes, and you may say, I don't see those people. Of course you don't, because they are trapped in their homes or wherever they live. And ideally, we will help these people and give them the tools to potentially lose weight and be healthier. Imagine if you had that small intestinal villus atrophy damage, which can be patchy, but you're eating food. Let's just say you're eating fast food because that's what you think food is. So you're eating sodas and fast food. You're driving through the drive-thru if you can, or you're having someone else drive through the drive-thru. You're eating pizzas and processed foods. All of those foods have little or no nutrient value, a lot of sugar, a lot of bad fat, and there is a difference between bad fats and good fats, and very little nutrient value that your body could potentially use as energy. So people do gain weight. When I say they are starving, when people that are obese are starving, I'm not kidding. They're really, really starving. So what we find, and what I've seen repeatedly in my practice, is that once we get people on a gluten-free diet, or my preference would be a paleo diet, and what that entails is whole food, grass-fed meat, fish, eggs, fruits and vegetables that are organic, and nuts and seeds. If we can get people on a very basic but very broad diet of whole foods, they will lose an enormous amount of weight. Sometimes very quickly, sometimes too quickly. But the reality is a gluten-free diet will allow the villus atrophy to repair itself. So your body wants to get better. It wants to heal. In the absence of gluten and dairy, your villi will grow back. It takes 6 months to a year. Don't get discouraged. And please don't try a gluten-free diet for a week or two and say, well, it didn't work for me. It actually takes 6 months to a year and sometimes longer for the villi to grow back. But once they grow back, and as they are growing back, those nutrients will get absorbed and your body will start to use them in order to heal. So your body will heal. Every cell in your body wants to get better. It wants to be healthy. It needs the tools necessary that we provide in our diet. As an emergency room nurse, I had no idea that we could not heal wounds appropriately if people were malnourished. I can't tell you how many times we saw people come in with leg wounds that were open, peripheral vascular disease, and diabetic wounds. So they would come in a wheelchair and their bandages would typically be rolling off their legs because we would at that point have to do dressing changes. and they would be coming in, somebody would wheel them in, and they would have a big bag of McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King or whatever fast food restaurant that was handy for them to get food. And the reality is there was no way we were going to be able to heal up those wounds in people with poor nutrition or poor nutritional intake, because those tissues cannot heal without certain nutrients that would be available to heal the tissue. It just doesn't happen. Especially protein, trace minerals, and vitamins. You need those things in our diet or to take supplements so that our bodies can heal. Unfortunately, if those vitamins and nutrients aren't there and the wounds can't heal, some of these diabetics actually ended up having their toes cut off or their feet cut off or their legs cut off. And it is a dire situation. It's much better to try to change your diet, to attempt a significant diet change and lifestyle change in an effort to heal our bodies and potentially prevent some of the medical sequelae that occur when we are malnourished. So again, as an ER nurse, as a nurse in the emergency department, I had no idea that it actually impacted people's health as much as it did about what they ate. What we eat as human beings has a huge impact on our lifelong health. And just to keep in mind that a lot of those people that also had those wounds were having to take antibiotics. Those antibiotics on a damaged intestine will further wipe out normal flora. Normal flora is very important in our intestines for keeping us healthy and also for sometimes manufacturing some of the vitamins that our bodies need. We are just learning, it's a tip of the iceberg thing, about how much the microbiome that live in our intestines and in our body everywhere impact our health. So my goal as a nurse for myself is to attempt to heal using food and increasing the live food that I eat, the fermented foods, the food that hasn't been cooked or irradiated. So a lot of super good, healthy, fermented, probiotic, prebiotic food that is useful for my intestines to regenerate or replant or reestablish itself in my intestines that are now healed. I know that my villi have grown back and that the environment in my small intestines can harbor really good microbiome, and I want diverse microbiome. I don't want just one kind of microbiome. I want a really diverse population of microbiome in my intestines and all over my body. It hugely impacts my health. And the more we learn about microbiome, the more we know how important it is. What people need to know about healing wounds is that it is very important that we have correct nutrition. I had one gentleman with a wound on his sacral area, which is at the bottom of your spine, your tailbone area. We had a really difficult time healing that up. And I actually got that gentleman as a private nurse after the wound nurses, the assisted living facility nurses, no one could heal it up. And he was relatively young. So I did what I normally do. I got the celiac panel on this gentleman, because it didn't make any sense that his wound shouldn't heal up, and come to find out he was a gene carrier for DQ2. So I discussed it with him and his family, and I said, I can heal up this wound, but he's going to have to be on a gluten-free diet. The family agreed, because the reality is they didn't want to pay me to come in every day to do dressing changes on this gentleman anymore, because it was very expensive. So I said, hey, look, here's the deal. If he changes his diet, because there's a good chance he's celiac, despite his negative antibody panel, there's a good chance that wound is going to heal up. He agreed to change his diet to go gluten-free, and within a very short period of time, I believe it was several years ago, but I believe it was about 7 to 10 days of being on a gluten-free diet, his wound healed up. It was somewhat shocking. Like you couldn't even tell it was there. And this had been a tunneling wound. So it healed up. And unfortunately, this gentleman did not stay on a gluten-free diet, which I highly recommended he stay on a gluten-free diet for the rest of his life. The tragedy is that he did die. And he died relatively young at the age of 53 of multiple autoimmune issues. So when I say to people that it is a lifelong diet change and lifestyle change, I'm not kidding. It behooves people to really understand how important nutrition is, especially if people do have celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. It's extremely important that people understand that it potentially is a life or death situation. Yes, we did heal up his wound, and unfortunately within a few years, he did die, which is sad because he and I really liked each other. He was a very nice guy, and it was a sad day for me when he passed away. Getting back to weight issues, more people are overweight when they're diagnosed with celiac disease than underweight. More people have constipation than diarrhea. More people have neurological disorders than gastrointestinal disorders. So we have to shake up what we think about celiac disease. We have to re-educate ourselves, even if we thought we had a paradigm in our head about what celiac disease was, because it is something very different. The vast majority of people will lose weight on a gluten-free diet, which is a good thing. Some people will gain weight because they have to gain weight because they've been underweight for so long. Once their body starts absorbing nutrients, then their body is actually able to build muscle and tissue appropriately, and most people come back to the weight that their body is comfortable at. I myself am I'm 5'9" 3/4, and my body likes to about 150 pounds. That's where my body has settled in at, and I'm good with that. It's a very comfortable weight for me. I'm sure if I did any major exercises or prepared for a marathon again, I might lose another 5 to 10 pounds, which is fine too. But right now I'm working on so many different things that I am very comfortable at 150 pounds. You have to decide what your ideal body weight is and see where your body settles out. Please keep in mind that you do have to be on a super good high-fat diet, and this is for just about everyone. There are some instances when a super good high-fat diet perhaps is not the best idea, but again, we take everyone as an individual experiment, if you will. If I have a super good high-fat breakfast, which for a long time when I started the paleo diet for about a year, I had a pound of bacon, 4 to 6 eggs, and 2 to 3 avocados every day for breakfast. That sounds like a lot, right? Well, it was, but keep in mind that my body was starving, my intestines were still healing, and I had to be able to absorb that fat in order to absorb any other nutrients, especially the fat-soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E, and K. So super good high fats are things like olive oil, coconut milk, avocados, avocado oil, lard, tallow, duck fat. There's lots of different options, but please make sure whatever oils and fats that you choose, that they're as clean as possible and as unrefined as possible, because they're much more bioavailable, which means your body can use them. There is a couple instances when we would have to work on people's ability to absorb that fat. Some people don't have enough stomach acid and are unable to liquefy that fat to the point where your body can actually utilize it. Some people don't have a gallbladder. We have to take all those things into account. So even people that are obese when they get diagnosed with celiac disease still do better on a super good high-fat diet, especially if that's coupled with a paleo type diet or a whole food diet. This doesn't have to be hard. It's extremely easy. And I tell people that if it's too hard or you're working too hard, then you're doing it wrong. This is very simple. It does not have to be hard to prepare your own food. Yes, you do have to shop for it. Yes, you do have to make some lists maybe in the beginning, But as you go along, it gets easier and easier to the point where you very rarely have to even think about food preparation or what you're going to do unless you're having a big dinner party. This is easy, especially once you have the staples on hand. So you can just walk in your kitchen and say, what do I have in my kitchen and what can I prepare for dinner tonight or breakfast? And breakfast in our house is typically leftovers from the dinner before, or very simply bacon, eggs, a hash, some type of meat and sweet potatoes, yams in the morning. Again, super good, high fat, and some protein, and even salads. We'll even eat salads in the morning. The reality is that when I eat a super good high fat breakfast, I am not hungry again until 4, 5, or 6 o'clock at night because my body is burning a slow burning energy, which is the fat. It's also very good for my brain and my neurological system. What is your brain? Your brain is made up of fat. So it's very important. So you can call me a fathead. That's fine. Your brain is made up of fat, and your brain should not shrink as you get older. So it's extremely important that you eat a super good high-fat diet so that you can maintain your neurological health. So if you hear that once you get diagnosed with celiac disease, you have to be on a low-fat diet, that's wrong information. You have to be on a super good high-fat diet because your body for a long time has not been able to break down or absorb the fat in your diet. That's when we see a lot of the fat-soluble vitamins being in very critically low range. A vitamin D3 level is a great indicator of how much you're absorbing and all of your other nutrients. So if your D3 is below, I like to think of anything below 40 as critically low. Some people I see in the teens or in the single digits for their vitamin D level. So we really need to make sure that, one, we're healing our intestines, two, the inflammation's going away and we're healing our immune system, and that we're actually able to break down the fat that we're consuming and thereby absorbing fat-soluble vitamins and then every other vitamin and nutrient that we consume. Hopefully this gives you a better idea about weight loss and weight gain on a gluten-free diet or a paleo diet. Our bodies want to get better. We have to give our bodies the nutrients in the high-fat diet that is going to help it heal. I'm Nadine Griskoyak, the Gluten Free RN. Thank you very much for joining me during episode 20 of the Gluten Free RN podcast. This podcast will be released every Friday at 9 a.m. If you like the Gluten Free RN podcast, please leave a review on iTunes. It helps other people find all of the great information that I am giving to you. And thank you very much to all the people all around the world that are listening to the Gluten Free RN podcast. Thank you for joining me. This is Nadine Griskoyak, the Gluten Free RN, signing off episode 20. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, eat well.